The Galactic Council had gathered in a massive hall that floated above the clouds of Varela Prime. Hundreds of alien delegates filled the seats arranged in circles, each one shimmering with different colors and forms. At the center stood the human envoy, Daniel Ross. He had served Earth for 20 years as its ambassador, and this was the moment he had feared for a long time. The council had called a vote, and the outcome was already clear. The humans were to be exiled from the Galactic Forum. The decision was not sudden. For years, other species had accused humans of breaking trade laws, expanding into restricted zones, and experimenting with forbidden technologies. They said humanity was reckless and dangerous, too quick to act without asking permission. Daniel had argued that humans were simply survivors. They built, adapted, and reached beyond limits because that was their nature. But no one in the council cared. When the vote ended, a cold voice declared that Earth and all its colonies were to be cut off from the galaxy. No trade, no access to shared science, no protection. Humanity was alone again. When Daniel returned to his quarters, he sat silently before the window that overlooked the bright rings of the planet. He remembered the early days when Earth had joined the council with hope and pride. It had been a time of cooperation and discovery. Humans had learned from other species and shared their own inventions freely. But with time, jealousy and fear had grown. Human ships had reached places even the council had ignored. Human engineers had turned barren moons into living colonies. Every success had made others uneasy. Daniel looked down at his hands and whispered to himself that this was not the end. Humanity would find a way to rise again. Back on Earth, the news spread fast. The announcement was broadcast across every channel. Crowds filled the streets in anger and disbelief. Some blamed the government. Others blamed the council, but most simply felt betrayed. President Laura Kent appeared on every screen, standing in front of the old United Nations building. Her voice was calm, steady, and full of quiet strength. She told the people that exile was not a punishment. It was a challenge. She said that humanity had been told it could not sit among the stars, so it would make its own table. Her words carried across the planet and reached the farthest colonies. People listened, and something in them changed. Fear turned into determination. In the following weeks, Earth entered a new phase of unity. Scientists, engineers, and leaders from every nation began to meet. Without the council's trade routes, the economy began to collapse. But humans were used to hardship. They adapted fast. Factories started to build new ships designed for deep space travel. Instead of relying on alien resources, humans looked to their own solar system. The moon became a manufacturing hub. Mars became the center of research. Mining stations on asteroids provided raw materials. Daniel worked with the government to form a new council, not of alien races, but of human worlds. It was small, fragile, and full of disagreement, but it was something new, something their own. At first there was fear. The council had cut off communication channels, and supply lines from alien trade vanished. Many colonies struggled to survive, but humans did not give up. They had faced worse on their own world's history. People remembered stories of explorers crossing oceans and pioneers building homes in deserts. This exile, they said, was just another frontier. Commander Ethan Brooks was one of those who refused to stay still. He had served in the Earth Space Defense and now led a group of ships to map unclaimed systems beyond the council border. His ships carried engineers, settlers, and dreamers. They called themselves the Free Convoy. Months later, the first transmission came back from Ethan's fleet. They had found a star system rich in resources and habitable worlds. The colonists named it New Horizon. When Daniel heard the message, he smiled for the first time in many months. Humanity had just taken its first step toward independence. President Kent ordered more fleets to follow. Soon, convoys departed from every major colony. Families packed their belongings, leaving the safety of the known galaxy for the promise of something their own. They faced dangers, unknown worlds, and the endless dark, but they went with courage. Meanwhile, in the Galactic Council, the reaction was mixed. Some alien leaders celebrated the exile, believing the humans would fade away. Others felt uneasy. The trade systems that had once relied on human-built networks began to slow down. Shipyards on alien worlds had used human designs. Their engineers missed the creativity and speed that humanity brought. Within a few years, small disruptions began to appear in supply chains. Energy prices rose. Production declined. The council ignored these signs, pretending nothing was wrong. On Earth, however, progress was fast. With no one to limit them, Human scientists began to experiment freely. They merged ideas from alien tech they had once studied with their own designs. Fusion engines grew more efficient. Artificial intelligence became more advanced. Medicine reached new heights. Without alien oversight, innovation moved at a pace that frightened even those who made it. Daniel sometimes wondered if exile was a curse or a gift. He realized it was both. 5 years after the exile, the first reports arrived from the new colonies. They were growing fast. Cities on New Horizon and Atlas Prime flourished. Independent trade routes were forming between human worlds. They exchanged food, minerals, and technology. They even started to build massive space yards capable of producing fleets. Daniel watched these changes with pride and hope. He often remembered the faces of those alien delegates who had voted to cast humanity out. He wondered what they would think if they saw this rebirth. One night, as he looked out from his apartment on Mars, Daniel received a message from President Kent. She thanked him for his service and told him that the Council's decision had done something unexpected. It had united humanity like never before. There were still differences, still debates, but now there was one shared goal: to survive and thrive without anyone's permission. Daniel replied that humanity had always done its best work when pushed against a wall. He ended his message with a single line: "They exiled us from their galaxy, but we will build our own." And with that, the story of exile became the story of beginning. The exiled humans did not waste a moment. The moment the Galactic Council had closed the doors, Earth and its colonies began preparing for a future of self-reliance. Ships were built, not to wait for trade or protection, but to carry people and goods to the far reaches of space. Commander Ethan Brooks led one of the first fleets, a convoy of vessels carrying settlers, engineers, and scientists eager to claim new worlds. Their destination was the uncharted void beyond the borders of the Council, a place where humans could shape their own future without interference. The journey was long and dangerous. Many ships were damaged by meteors, energy storms, or unknown gravitational anomalies. The crews had to learn quickly how to repair, adapt, and survive in the harshness of space. Yet every challenge only strengthened their resolve. The humans relied on each other, sharing knowledge, skills, and courage. Families lived aboard the ships, children were born in orbit, and the first stories of life beyond the old worlds began to take root. They called themselves the Free Convoy, a name that carried pride and hope. Their first stop was a star system with a planet they named New Horizon. It was a harsh world, with strong winds, rough seas, and strange vegetation, but it had water and a breathable atmosphere. The settlers landed and began building shelters, farms, and laboratories. Every day was a struggle. Crops failed, storms destroyed structures, and disease sometimes struck. But humans were not accustomed to giving up. They learned from failure, rebuilt, and pushed forward. New Horizon became a symbol, the first of many worlds that would carry the human spirit into the galaxy. Meanwhile, back on Earth, President Laura Kent worked tirelessly to unite the people. She addressed the nation repeatedly, reminding them that the Council had acted out of fear, not justice. Her speeches were simple but powerful. She told the people that exile was not punishment, but opportunity. She encouraged scientists to innovate, engineers to build, and citizens to support the colonies. Earth itself became a hub for supply and training, ensuring that the fleets and settlements had what they needed to survive and grow. As more colonies were established, trade began to develop among the human worlds. They exchanged food, water, metals, and technology. Each colony specialized in what it could produce best. Mars focused on scientific research. Mining stations on asteroids sent rare minerals, and orbital factories manufactured advanced equipment. The humans learned to depend on each other, creating a network that connected their scattered worlds. Communication was key. The Pulse Network, an early system of instantaneous messages between ships and colonies, allowed humans to coordinate quickly, share discoveries, and solve problems together. Despite their focus on survival, humans did not ignore exploration. Ships left the known colonies to chart unclaimed systems, find habitable planets, and search for resources. Every discovery added to the Dominion's strength. The human fleets became more organized, with experienced commanders training new generations. Commander Ethan Brooks became a legend, known for his leadership during the earliest journeys. His decisions saved countless lives and established the principles that would guide human expansion for decades. The Galactic Council began to notice the progress. They had expected the exiled humans to struggle, to fade into obscurity. But reports came of thriving colonies, successful fleets, and increasing influence in previously unclaimed space. Some council members worried. Trade networks that had relied on human technology were faltering. Systems that had once depended on council oversight began to function independently. The humans were proving that exile had not weakened them, but had made them stronger, more resilient, and more capable. Life in the colonies was not easy. Settlers faced unknown animals, harsh climates, and limited resources. Disease and accidents took lives. But the spirit of humanity endured. People built hospitals, schools, and research centers. Children were educated not just in survival, but in engineering, science, and leadership. They were prepared to carry the human legacy forward. Communities celebrated milestones together, from the first successful harvests to the launch of new fleets. Every achievement reinforced the belief that humans were capable of building their own future, no matter the obstacles. Communication with Earth remained crucial. Supplies, instructions, and guidance traveled along the Pulse network, linking the colonies with the home world. Scientists on Earth shared knowledge about biology, technology, and energy systems. Engineers sent designs for more efficient ships and structures. Leaders coordinated trade, defense, and exploration. Even though humanity was exiled, its worlds were not isolated. They were connected in purpose, vision, and determination. After 10 years, the Dominion had grown in size and capability. New Horizon and Atlas Prime were thriving. Orbital colonies served as hubs for industry and transportation. Fleets could move between systems quickly, and communication was nearly instantaneous. Humans had built a system that rivaled and in some ways surpassed what they had once known within the Council. But despite their success, humanity remained cautious. They had learned the value of independence and would not allow themselves to be controlled again. Every policy, every fleet deployment, and every settlement was planned to ensure that humanity would remain free. Commander Ethan Brooks reflected on the journey often. He remembered the early days of fear, the endless challenges of space travel, and the determination of those who had left with him. He thought of the Council's dismissal, the way they had underestimated humanity. Yet every step had shown him the truth. Humans thrived when given freedom. They grew stronger when forced to rely on themselves, and they had proven that even in exile, humanity could build something greater than anyone had imagined. The human colonies had not just survived. They had learned to organize, to trade, to build, and to protect themselves. The Pulse Network, the fleets, and the new worlds were all part of a system that would become the backbone of the Dominion. And as humans looked to the stars, they knew that the future was theirs to shape. No council, no alien race, and no law could stop them. They had been exiled, but in exile they had discovered their true power. The story of humanity was only beginning, and the galaxy had yet to see the full strength of the species it had cast out. 50 years had passed since the day the Galactic Council had exiled Earth, and the name of humanity had become both a warning and a legend among the stars. The colonies that had started as small settlements were now great cities that shone under alien suns. The Dominion, as people had begun to call it, stretched across many systems connected by vast networks of trade and communication. It was not ruled by one government, but guided by an understanding that every human world shared the same purpose: to build and protect what was theirs. People no longer spoke of the exile as a tragedy. They spoke of it as the moment when humanity had finally become free. Admiral Lucas Green stood on the bridge of the flagship Endeavour. It was one of the largest ships ever built by human hands, 3 kilometers long and capable of crossing the void faster than any vessel known to the galaxy. Its engines hummed softly, a sound that seemed alive. Lucas had served in the early convoys when the first colonies were struggling to survive. He had seen the dark days of hunger and cold, but he had also seen how humans adapted and never stopped building. Now, as he looked out over the glowing stars, he knew the Dominion had become something far greater than anyone had imagined. On the planet Atlas Prime, Dr. Naomi Carter was overseeing a project that would change the course of human science forever. The Dominion Science Directorate had discovered how to combine fragments of alien technology with human engineering, creating new forms of energy, propulsion, and communication. Naomi had once worked under the restrictions of the Galactic Council, where research was slow and bound by rules. But now there were no limits, and her team pushed forward every day. They had developed ships that could travel vast distances without the need for wormholes, a breakthrough that gave humanity true independence. Naomi often said that exile had been the best thing that ever happened to human science. Across the galaxy, other species watched with mixed feelings. The Council, which had once been proud and powerful, now found itself struggling to maintain control. Trade routes were collapsing, technologies were failing, and younger races were looking to the Dominion for leadership. Rumors spread that the Dominion ships were faster, its weapons stronger, and its people more united than ever. Some planets that had once been loyal to the Council began to reach out to humanity, seeking trade and alliance. The balance of power was changing. When the first Dominion trade fleet entered Council space, the reaction was one of awe and fear. The ships were sleek, silver, and massive, moving with precision and grace. They carried not just goods but knowledge and medicine. The Dominion envoys offered help to struggling systems, asking nothing in return but mutual respect. For many worlds, it was the first time they had seen such generosity from any power. The Council tried to block the expansion, but it was too late. The people of the galaxy had begun to see humanity not as the reckless species they had exiled, but as a symbol of progress. Daniel Ross, the old ambassador who had once stood before the Council during Earth's exile, was now gone, but his name lived on. Statues of him stood in the plazas of the Dominion worlds, his words carved beneath them. He had said that humanity would rise again not through war, but through creation. His dream had come true. His student, Julia Adams, now led the Dominion Diplomatic Corps. She had studied the history of the exile and knew that revenge would destroy everything they had built. Under her guidance, the Dominion followed a policy of cautious peace, though it was clear that their strength was unmatched. One day, Admiral Lucas Green received a message from the Dominion High Council. A new world beyond the edge of the known galaxy had been found, a world with strange energy readings and structures that seemed older than any known civilization. Lucas was ordered to lead a fleet to investigate. The mission was dangerous, but he accepted without hesitation. The fleet left Atlas Prime and vanished into the dark. What they found would shape the future of both humanity and the galaxy. The planet was covered in silver forests and glowing rivers that seemed alive. At its center stood a tower that reached into the clouds, pulsing with energy. When the fleet sent probes, they discovered that the structure emitted a signal older than the Council itself. Dr. Naomi Carter arrived soon after with a research team. They realized that the signal contained data, mathematical patterns, and messages encoded in light. It was a relic of a civilization that had vanished before the birth of most known species. Humanity had found a library written by the ancients. As Naomi and her team worked, the Council grew desperate. Reports of the discovery reached them, and they knew that whoever controlled that planet would control knowledge beyond imagination. The Council sent ships demanding access, claiming that the planet belonged to the galactic community, but when their fleets arrived, they found the Dominion already there. The human ships stood in silence, blocking entry. Lucas sent a single message to the approaching Council Admiral. It said only one line: "You exiled us. Now we decide who enters." The confrontation never turned into battle. The Council fleet withdrew, realizing that they were outmatched. For the first time in galactic history, the Council had backed down. The event sent shockwaves through every species. Humanity had become the power they once feared, but instead of conquering, the Dominion shared the knowledge they found. Naomi's research was made public to all species who respected the independence of the Dominion. The technology from the ancient world allowed faster communication, new sources of energy, and new ways to heal. The galaxy entered an age of renewal, led by the very people it had cast out. Admiral Lucas Green stood once more on the bridge of the Endeavor, watching the stars. He thought of the long journey that had brought humanity to this point, from exile to greatness. He knew that their success came not from power or wealth, but from unity and the will to never give up. Humanity had learned to build from nothing, to turn rejection into strength. The Dominion was not an empire built on fear. It was a community built on survival and ambition. On Earth, now a peaceful and thriving world once again, a great celebration took place. People from every colony gathered to honor the anniversary of the exile, not as a day of sorrow, but as a day of pride. President Laura Kent had passed long ago, but her words were spoken again by children who learned them in school. If they exile us from their table, we will build our own. The people cheered and lights filled the sky as ships from across the Dominion flew in formation above the planet. In the far reaches of space, The signals from the ancient world continued to broadcast, whispering secrets of long-lost civilizations. Humanity listened, learned, and built once more. They had become the builders of their own destiny. The stars that once watched in judgment now watched in wonder, for the humans had done what no one believed possible. They had turned exile into empire, and from the ashes of rejection, they had created a dominion that would outlast them all. The rise of the human dominion sent waves of fear and curiosity across the galaxy. The once powerful Galactic Council found itself facing a reality it had never imagined. For centuries it had ruled over hundreds of worlds, making laws and setting the limits of progress. But now those same laws meant nothing to the humans who had been exiled. They had turned exile into freedom, and freedom into greatness. The Council watched as human fleets crossed borders without permission, bringing trade, technology, and ideas that reshaped the galaxy's balance. The other species who had once called humans reckless now whispered about their strength and discipline. They remembered the vote that had cast Earth out, and many of them began to regret their decision. On the central world of the Council, the chambers that had once been full of confidence were now filled with doubt. Supplies from the outer colonies were arriving late. Technologies that relied on human parts and software were breaking down. Entire industries that had depended on human trade were failing. The Council members argued endlessly, each one blaming another. Some said they should open negotiations with the Dominion and ask for trade. Others warned that humanity would use this as a way to take control of the galaxy. The Chancellor of the Council, a tall crystalline being named Virith, stood before them and spoke with heavy words. He said that the galaxy had made a mistake in casting out humanity. Now that mistake might cost them everything. Meanwhile, on Atlas Prime, the heart of the Dominion, life moved forward with a rhythm of purpose. The great cities shimmered under the light of twin suns, and every street was filled with workers, scientists, and traders from across the stars. Unlike the Council, the Dominion did not ban outsiders. Species who wished to live under its protection were welcome if they respected its laws. Some came out of desperation, others out of admiration. They found in humanity a strength they could trust. Admiral Lucas Green walked through the vast shipyards where hundreds of vessels were being built. The ships were not just for war, but for exploration, trade, and rescue. Humanity had learned that true power came from creation, not destruction. Dr. Naomi Carter had become one of the most respected scientists in the Dominion. Her research on the ancient signals had brought knowledge that pushed human technology beyond anything the Council possessed. She now led a new project known as the Pulse Network, a system that allowed instant communication across thousands of light years. The Pulse Network connected every human world, every colony, every ship. It was the nervous system of the Dominion, and it gave them an advantage no other power could match. Naomi worked long hours in her lab, surrounded by young scientists who had grown up never knowing what exile meant. For them, the Dominion had always existed. She often thought of Daniel Ross and President Kent, wondering what they would say if they could see how far humanity had come. The Council's fear grew with every passing year. Reports came from border worlds that human fleets were being welcomed as heroes. Planets tired of corruption and neglect were joining the Dominion voluntarily. They traded freely, adopted human systems, and began to call themselves allied worlds. In less than a century, humanity had gone from outcasts to leaders of a galactic movement. The Council sent envoys to negotiate, but the Dominion was cautious. Julia Adams, now head of the Dominion Diplomatic Corps, met with these envoys many times. She listened to their offers and their apologies, but she never promised anything. She knew that humanity did not need the Council anymore. They had built something stronger, something that could not be taken away. Still, the Dominion did not seek war. Julia reminded everyone that peace brought progress while war brought ruin. But peace did not mean weakness. Along the borders, the Dominion defense fleet stood ready. The ships were sleek and silent, built with technology so advanced that Council spies could not understand it. Admiral Lucas Green commanded the defense forces, and he made sure that no one dared to threaten the human worlds. The Dominion did not expand by conquest. It expanded because others wanted to join. But even so, whispers began to spread among the Council's intelligence networks that the humans were preparing for something greater. One night, a small Council ship entered Dominion space without permission. It was a desperate act by a group of Council scientists who wanted to defect. Their ship was damaged and pursued by their own military. Admiral Green ordered his fleet to intercept. The humans rescued the ship and brought the scientists to Atlas Prime. They revealed that the Council was planning to launch a massive strike to destroy the ancient world humanity had found, the one that contained the old technology. The Council feared that humanity would use the knowledge there to take full control of the galaxy. The Dominion leaders gathered in secret to discuss their next move. Naomi Carter was furious when she heard about the Council's plan. She knew the destruction of that world would not only harm humanity, but erase history itself. Admiral Green proposed a simple answer. If the Council wanted to destroy the past, humanity would protect it with the future. Within weeks, fleets were mobilized, but not for war. They formed a barrier around the ancient world, ensuring that no one could harm it. The Council sent warnings, but humanity ignored them. Julia Adams sent a final message to the Council, saying that the Dominion would not start a war but would finish one if it came. The galaxy held its breath. For months, tension filled the stars. The Council's fleets gathered on the edge of Dominion space, but they did not move. The fear of human power was too strong. No one wanted to be the one to start a war they knew they could not win. Slowly, the Council backed down and the threat faded. The incident became known as the Silent War, a conflict that never began because one side no longer had the courage to fight. The Dominion celebrated quietly. Humanity had proven that it did not need to conquer to be respected. It only needed to stand firm. On the anniversary of the exile, President Laura Kent's statue on Earth was lit with golden light. People across the Dominion watched the ceremony through the Pulse network. Admiral Green stood beside Julia Adams and Dr. Naomi Carter as the crowd cheered. Julia spoke to the people, her voice calm and proud. She said that humanity had once been cast out for being different, but now those differences had become their greatest strength. The crowd fell silent as she ended her speech with the same words Laura Kent had spoken a century ago. If they exile us from their table, we will build our own. That night, as the celebrations filled the skies, Naomi looked up at the stars and thought about what would come next. The galaxy was changing again. The Council was weaker than ever, and the Dominion was growing stronger every day. But she also knew that power came with responsibility. Humanity had built a new world, a new order, and they would have to protect it from the mistakes of the past. As the ships of the Dominion glided silently across the stars, the galaxy watched in awe and fear. The humans who had once been exiled now held the destiny of millions in their hands, and everyone knew that the story of their rise was far from over. The century of human exile had ended not with revenge, but with the rise of a dominion that spanned thousands of systems. Humanity had built its own empire not by conquest but by determination, unity, and innovation. The Galactic Council, once feared and respected, now watched the humans with awe and caution. For every fleet, every city, every innovation reminded them that humanity had grown beyond their control. Captain Julia Adams stood on the bridge of the flagship Ascendant, looking out at the stars. She had been born into a world that had always known the Dominion. She had never felt exile herself, but she understood the weight of history. Her mission now was to ensure that humanity remained free, and that its influence brought not fear, but stability to the galaxy. Reports came in daily from colonies across the Dominion. New worlds had been discovered and settled. Trade networks stretched like a web across the stars, connecting planets that had never before spoken to each other. Technology was advancing faster than ever. Ships that once took years to reach the outer systems now arrived in months. Medicine had reached a point where diseases that had plagued humanity for centuries were nearly eradicated. Education, communication, and governance were shared freely among the human worlds. Every system had its own leaders, but all were bound by the principles laid down by the First Council after the exile: unity, independence, and progress. The Council had sent its delegation once more. Their ships arrived at the edge of Dominion space, silent and cautious. Inside, the delegates debated endlessly. They were no longer sure of their authority. The humans had shown patience and wisdom, and every attempt to intimidate them had failed. Captain Adams received the delegation with calm authority. She spoke not with anger but with clarity. Humanity did not seek revenge. They did not want to rejoin the Council under its old rules. They had built a future that respected freedom, and that freedom was non-negotiable. But humanity was willing to trade, to share knowledge, to cooperate. provided that all parties treated each other as equals. The Council listened, uneasy and humbled. Many worlds that had once been loyal to the Council began to reconsider their positions. Some quietly asked to join the Dominion, not as subjects but as allies. The Dominion welcomed them, insisting only on mutual respect and adherence to its principles. Slowly, the galaxy began to shift. The power of the Council waned, while the influence of the Dominion grew. Species that had once mocked or feared humanity now sought guidance and partnership. The humans had become the architects of a new order, one built not on dominance but on collaboration and innovation. Back on Earth, celebrations marked the centennial of the exile. People remembered the moment when the Council had turned its back, and they honored the courage of those who had left for the stars. The cities glowed with light as ships flew overhead, a symbol of the human spirit that refused to be broken. Julia Adams spoke to the gathered crowd, telling them that humanity had achieved what many thought impossible. They had turned punishment into opportunity, rejection into strength, and exile into leadership. Children born on distant worlds listened with awe, knowing that their heritage was one of resilience and vision. In the farthest reaches of Dominion space, Admiral Lucas Green led a fleet on a mission of exploration. They charted new systems, studied unknown phenomena, and made contact with previously isolated species. The Dominion's purpose was not conquest, but discovery and protection. Every planet added to the network strengthened humanity's ability to ensure peace and stability. Green knew that their journey would continue for generations. Humanity had not finished building, and the stars were still full of mysteries waiting to be understood. Dr. Naomi Carter stood in her laboratory on Atlas Prime, reviewing the data from recent explorations. Signals from distant systems had revealed new forms of energy, new materials, and even hints of life in uncharted regions. Naomi had once been limited by rules imposed by the Council, but now there were no barriers. Her team of scientists, engineers, and explorers worked tirelessly to ensure that every discovery benefited the Dominion. Knowledge was shared freely but with wisdom and care. Humanity had learned that true power came not from hoarding knowledge, but from using it responsibly to protect and grow the community. The Council, now weakened and cautious, sent another message. They asked for trade, for cooperation, and for access to some of the technology that humanity had developed from the ancient world. Julia Adams considered their request carefully. She knew that the Council had once tried to control humanity, and she remembered the lessons of the past. The Dominion responded with a single condition: cooperation would only occur as equals. The Council agreed, and a new era of dialogue began, one in which humanity led by example rather than by force. Across the Dominion, life continued to flourish. Cities grew taller, fleets grew larger, and education expanded to every planet. Children learned not just of human history, but of the history of the galaxy, including the mistakes and failures of those who had once exiled them. They learned the value of independence, the importance of unity, and the power of creativity. Every human knew that their strength came not from weapons, but from their ability to build, to explore, and to adapt. One evening, Julia Adams stood on the observation deck of Atlas Prime's central tower, watching the stars shimmer. She thought of the long path humanity had traveled, from exile to dominion. She thought of the sacrifices, the courage, and the determination that had brought them here. She knew that the future would hold challenges, but she also knew that humanity was ready. The Dominion would not seek war, but it would not back down from protecting its people and its principles. The stars, once witnesses to humanity's rejection, now shone in admiration. Fleets glided across the void, carrying settlers, traders, and explorers. Signals pulsed through the pulse network, connecting every world. The Dominion had become more than a collection of planets. It was a living, growing testament to what humanity could achieve. And while the Galactic Council still existed, it was no longer the ruler of the galaxy. Humanity had built its own path, and the galaxy had no choice but to watch in awe. As the light of countless suns bathed the Dominion, Julia whispered the words that had guided humanity for generations. If they exile us from their table, we will build our own. And humanity had done just that. From the ashes of rejection, they had created a dominion of hope, of strength, and of endless possibility. The galaxy had learned a lesson that it would never forget. To underestimate humanity was to ignore the very spirit that could turn exile into empire and rejection into destiny.